Aston Martin has always carried a certain magic, the kind of quiet confidence that comes from a brand built on beauty, speed, and an unshakable belief in its own identity. But behind the elegance, behind the handcrafted leather and the roar of its V12 engines, lives a company constantly fighting the weight of its own ambitions. The story of the DBS 770 Ultimate, one of the most limited and powerful models Aston Martin has ever built, captures this tension perfectly. On the surface, it looks like a celebration of engineering and craftsmanship. But beneath that surface lies the financial gamble of a company that has spent decades trying to balance exclusivity with survival. In truth, the DBS 770 Ultimate wasn't just a car. It was a message, a promise, and a risk rolled into one. Aston Martin has always lived in a space where art meets danger. Building luxury performance cars is expensive on its own, but building them in tiny numbers multiplies the risk. The DBS 770 Ultimate, with only a few hundred units ever made, represents the highest form of that gamble. Each car requires huge investment before it ever reaches a customer. New materials, new engineering solutions, specialized labor, new marketing, fresh supplier contracts, and countless hours of testing. The cost is high, the potential return unpredictable, and the margin for error brutally thin. Unlike mass-market brands that spread their production costs across hundreds of thousands of units, Aston Martin pours millions into projects where only a handful of buyers exist. This creates a strange financial tension. The car needs to be expensive enough to justify the investment, but special enough to convince collectors it's worth buying before it even arrives. In a way, limited-run models like the 770 Ultimate become symbols of Aston Martin's identity. They tell the world, we can still create something no one else can. That message matters because Aston Martin is not just selling cars, it is selling legacy, taste, and the feeling of belonging to an elite group. But emotionally powerful products can become financially dangerous. The company depends on the success of each special model to keep momentum, and the brand's image rises and falls with the confidence of those who buy it. If even one limited series launches without enough demand, the financial ripple can be felt across the entire company. That is the risk of exclusivity. It must be constantly defended, constantly proven, constantly renewed. The DBS 770 Ultimate represents the peak of Aston Martin's traditional approach, the last of the big V12 Grand Tourers, the final chapter of a long era defined by raw combustion and hand-built character. For collectors, that made it irresistible. A farewell model always carries emotional power, and Aston Martin used that moment carefully. They shaped the car not just as a machine, but as a time capsule. It came with more power, more precision, and more detail than any DBS before it, not because the company needed to impress engineers, but because they needed to capture a feeling, finality. But even with that emotional angle, it doesn't remove the financial truth. Producing a last-of-its-kind car is a high-stakes bet. If it succeeds, it becomes a financial cushion. If it fails, it becomes a heavy loss. This is the balancing act Aston Martin has lived with for generations. The brand is famous, admired, even romanticized, yet it has spent years flipping between profit and loss. The reality is that in the world of ultra-luxury cars, prestige does not guarantee financial safety. Every special model is both an opportunity and a risk. When a company invests millions into a project like the 770 Ultimate, they do it knowing the decision could help stabilize future development or create new financial pressure. The market for such cars is emotional. It changes with global economies, personal fortunes, cultural trends, and even the shifting tastes of high-net-worth buyers. That makes predicting demand incredibly difficult. A car that looks like a guaranteed success on paper can suddenly become a slow seller if the world's financial climate shifts even slightly. And for a company like Aston Martin, one miscalculation can echo for years. Despite this instability, Aston Martin keeps producing these limited masterpieces because they serve a purpose beyond short-term profit. They reinforce the brand's image. They remind people why the company matters. They attract attention, investment, and media coverage. And most importantly, they inspire loyalty in the small circle of buyers who can afford them. Those buyers are essential. They act as both customers and ambassadors, people whose enthusiasm keeps the brand alive in ways numbers alone cannot measure. Yet even with loyal collectors, the risk remains. A company cannot live on passion alone. It needs stability. And stability does not come from tiny production runs. It comes from consistent models, reliable sales, and careful strategy. The DBS 770 Ultimate shows how deeply Aston Martin understands both the reward and the danger of exclusivity. It is a car built with purpose, to mark an ending, to strengthen the brand's image, and to capture the attention of the automotive world. But emotionally powerful decisions often hide financial storms underneath. The cost of producing a car at this level is massive, and the pressure for it to succeed is just as large. Still, Aston Martin continues to walk this thin line because without these bold moves, the company loses the very identity that makes it valuable. In the end, the 770 Ultimate is not just a car. It is a reminder that sometimes a brand must take risks to protect the thing that makes it beautiful. It shows the fragile balance between ambition and reality, where every masterpiece carries a price, not just in money but in the future of the company itself. Aston Martin's story is one of courage as much as craftsmanship. The DBS 770 Ultimate is proof of that courage. It stands as a final salute to an era of big engines and bigger dreams, created by a company always reaching higher even when the ground beneath it feels uncertain. And that is the heart of Aston Martin's journey, a constant fight to turn passion into survival, beauty into business, and limited-run risks into lasting legends.